Hello and welcome to episode 5 of the Cloud Computing Show for the C-Suites with Brad Nelson, an internationally recognised and world's #1 cloud industry expert and thought leader, David Linthicum. This show is sponsored by Nelson Hilliard, cloud computing recruitment specialists, placing great people in cloud, IoT, fintech and AI. In this week's show, David and I will be talking about cloud providers are relatively new, so how do you effectively communicate with them? Hi Dave, great to see you on the C-Suite show again.
It's great to see you too. I'm looking forward to this topic.
Excellent. A question I'm sure you're more than familiar with, Dave. And as a C-level, would you treat cloud providers like any other vendors, or are there special circumstances?
I think you would. I think that AWS's inability to answer the phone, 5 years ago, which was kind of interesting to enterprises, has kind of gone away. So there's enterprise sales reps that exist for AWS, for Microsoft, of course, and for Google. And it's a culture where people are able to adapt to the needs of the enterprise, where it's not vice versa. So the enterprise should really communicate with them as any other enterprise vendors, such as IBM or Oracle, who are also cloud providers, but CA and other folks who are buying software from. So the idea is that these folks are delivering value to you for a price. And even though you're leasing the stuff, you're renting the cloud, you're doing an as, per use basis kind of thing, doesn't really kind of take away from your ability to negotiate and your ability to demand good service from your cloud providers. So my advice to my enterprise clients is that they hold the cloud provider's feet to the fire, that they're like any other enterprise vendor. And if they think they're different, they better get over that pretty quick, because enterprises are looking for software services, for storage, compute, all these things. Even though you're delivering over the open internet as a service, really doesn't make much of a difference to them. They've had as a service stuff before, EDI hubs and B2B integration hubs, things like that. And so enterprises are very used to dealing with that. So look at SLAs, create the service level agreements you're looking to get into, define how they're going to be successful in your mind, and hold them to living up to the success criteria. Because if you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile, just like any other vendor out there. So I would be very careful to communicate with them directly and forcefully, and be very fervent in how you're going to state your needs, your requirements, and their ability to live up to your requirements.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's everyone's kind of really has to understand the crunch of the business is the service level agreements, isn't it? And I don't think you can arrive to an understanding of how your business sits with going to another provider on any level, cloud provider or any particular provider of any service that you're using, without establishing what the service level agreement will be. And that's normally determined by some sort of time factor or budget or both, usually both, and manpower and how much money needs to be thrown at a team, etc. And obviously, you've got the basics like communicating storage needs and understanding, where the products fall down with regards to latency, security management, and geographic distribution, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we need to do when there are service level agreements is define the performance we're looking for, their ability to deliver the services we're looking for, compute, storage, database services, things like that, and also some sort of monetary damages in case they're unable to deliver it. So if you have an outage that lasts a day, as an enterprise, you could lose $20 million in terms of goodwill with your clients, in terms of your ability to, in essence, provide the services you need to your clients, things like that. And the cloud providers need to step up and live up to their part of the agreement, and ensure that they're going to make good on their deficiencies that are going on. So when you have a service level agreement, the SLA, it's a contract, so to speak, very much like, I have service level agreements with my clients, and so I have to live up to my agreements, else I'm going to be penalized in some way, in some predetermined fashion. And you have to have that with your cloud providers as well. So if they're unable to live up to what they're looking to do, then they have to basically pony up some monetary damages to make it happen. And that's something that the public cloud providers were very reluctant in living up to. But the enterprises absolutely demanded that those things be in there. And I recommend to enterprises that they write those things into the SLAs.
Yeah, exactly. Just to pick your brains, but can you summarize a situation that you know of that you've experienced yourself or you've heard of where SLAs have been broken and the impact of not actually communicating or having that relationship with your cloud service provider. I'm sure everyone would be interested to hear, how badly it went wrong or something, just to maybe steer them away from a similar sort of situation.
Yeah, performance is the big one. So in other words, we'll define certain latency requirements, or basically they're able to produce information based on a request going in a certain amount of time. And if there's a lot of latency that occurs, such as we find in some multi-tenant things with some, basically saturation of compute cycles and saturation of the network, things like that, then, and we're able to measure that, then we're going back to the cloud provider and saying we need to either fix this or you need to basically pay us the differences in terms of the penalties that are defined within the SLA in terms of latency. And that's when the negotiations start and the lawyers start getting involved, and it becomes kind of a mess unto that. But the reality is that they defined what performance criteria is, and there's an agreement between the meeting of the minds between the enterprises and the cloud providers. And if they're unable to live up to that performance requirement, then they owe them a certain amount of money. It doesn't typically end up being what's written in the SLA, but the reality is that they're deficient in terms of delivery on the agreement. And so you have to understand that SLAs are like any other legal contract. And even though it's tied with technology, and we're dealing with new technology that really hasn't been measured, over a long period of time, which is really what cloud computing is, the reality is you have to make good on those contracts. And whether you're an enterprise and you're deficient in your end, and sometimes that happens, you're unable to live up to their expectations of the cloud provider, or more often than not, you're a cloud provider that's unable to live up to the expectations that the enterprises are looking for. There has to be some sort of monetary incentive for both parties to live up to the agreement.
Yeah, I agree, and I also would add to what you've just said in the respects that measuring cloud computing is. Are you drinking beer?
No, it's iced tea.
Oh, it's iced tea. Okay, so it's
has ice in it. You guys put ice in your beer?
Ice in the beer? Not. We're in Australia, so sometimes I guess. I've digressed. Just going back to your point about measuring cloud, the measuring stick changes so frequently, doesn't it? Because of the rate at which technology is the boundaries are being pushed with the rate of the development within technology. That the SLAs have to be as dynamic as they can be based on the situational circumstance each project sees you in. Would you agree?
Yeah, and you have to remember that they're changeable based on the needs of the enterprise, and they're also negotiable based on the needs of the enterprise and the needs of the cloud provider. However, enterprises aren't really going to move forward with cloud providers unless they're able to basically establish a service level or a minimum service level they would come up with, or else they can't hold their feet to the fire. Or else the cloud providers could do a crappy job in delivering their services and not necessarily provide, things that the enterprises need, such as storage, compute cycles, and things like that. And at the same time, the cloud providers are concerned about the enterprises becoming too demanding and holding their feet to the fire in terms of the SLAs. And so they want to basically push the SLAs out. The reality is that enterprises are not going to move into the public cloud unless there's SLAs that are there and basically that are able to protect their interests. Because if they're moving IT in terms of 20 to 50% of their existing workloads into the cloud, they have to have some sort of criteria for how the cloud's going to be measured against their success or failure. And I understand why the cloud providers don't want to sign it, but they're not going to be able to get the larger enterprises into the cloud without these SLAs. At Amazon's reInvent last week, they just announced lots of new clients and lots of big companies that are moving into the cloud. And I guarantee each one of those has their own SLAs that have been established against Amazon's criteria to protect themselves. So Amazon needs to understand that they have an interest in producing the services at the performance level that they're looking for in a way that they're looking for the services to be delivered. But the enterprises are really expecting to consume them a certain way. And so you have to have the meeting in the minds, or else it's not going to be a successful relationship.
Yes, agree again with you there, Dave. I don't think there's a point where I disagree with you on any of this, because it's so logical and it makes so much sense. And I think a lot of relationships put themselves in a huge amount of jeopardy and turmoil with not agreeing achievable SLAs or realistic SLAs based on their needs, because there's not enough investigation gone into the consultative part of the business to understand what's realistic with regards to the service level agreement. So I think you're absolutely spot on. I thoroughly enjoyed that, and I believe we've got a blog that goes with this show as well. So courtesy of your good self. So thank you very much, and I'll make sure there's a link below in the description of the video. Thanks for that.
You got it, man. Looking forward to it.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Dave, for being part of the C-Suite show this week. Really appreciate it, and again, thank you for writing such a great blog about the topic of today's show.
Well, you got to read it to find out.
I've read it. It's good, folks. So make sure you have a little read of that. So thanks again for watching, everyone, and thanks, Dave, for your time. I really appreciate it. And thanks for watching, everyone. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on our weekly cloud computing shows and also the cloud computing news, which I do each week. You can reach David on Twitter, which is @DavidLinthicum, and you can reach myself on Twitter @Nelson_Hilliard. Thanks again for watching, and make sure you read the blog.